Cool. Okay, so shall we start? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we wanted to discuss essentially the issue that I shared now in the chat, which is like what will be the best way for us to implement some of the missing features we have in the coverage and the corpus management feature in coverage fuzzing. So we currently want to use the GitLab generic package registry as a place to store corpuses, because I would say it answers most of the requirements that we have.
From my knowledge, could you describe what's in the corpus? What is a corpus?
Yeah, so essentially we have like fast tests are kind of special tests that we are running in the CI, either so we are running them in the CI, and those tests, those jobs, they essentially produce test files. So so those files, we want them essentially to be saved at the corpus registry, and then the next time that the job runs again, so for example, the user he commit new code, and then the tests run again. So it needs to download. We have essentially a CLI that downloads previous test cases that were generated. So it so it essentially learns. So it downloads the previous test cases from the generic package registry, and then starts essentially fuzzing again, running the fuzz tests, and generates new files, and then we save them again, essentially overwriting the last one. So it's like it's not really growing indefinitely, but it's changing, I would say, those test files, and we need to save like each run at the end, we need to save them.
Okay, and so this could happen like thousands with every CI run, basically. Is it going to happen? We're going to update a new file?
Yeah, so this is why we use essentially we are not using really the versions in the generic package registry. We are using always essentially one version. So this is also like a feature that I guess we need to discuss, that essentially life cycle, because we don't really need like all the, so even if you upload currently, if you upload the same version again, it's still like it's being saved, the previous like version uploads. So we don't really need them. So we essentially would like to have a life cycle that would delete like or will save only last 3 uploads, or even just the last one.
Yeah, I like that idea. And what about using something like the pipeline tag or something like that as the version? Would that be something that you would want to do, or is it you do just?
So we just use like a constant, because we don't really use. We have like for every, so essentially, so user like would have, for example, 5 fast tests like with different names. So we will have 5 corpuses.
Test 1.
Yeah, exactly 5 corpuses, and yeah, every time one of them will run, it will like upload. It will override the will override the corpus that relates to this specific job. So like fastest 1 has fastest 1 corpus, fastest 2 has fastest 2 corpus.
Okay, and why can you remind me why they shouldn't be visible in the registry, or they should be hidden?
Yeah, so I guess Sass and Sam can answer this.
Yeah, so we want to build a different experience for how customers will interact with these corpus objects, a little bit different from packages. Because like Evgeny was talking about, these are going to be bundles that are used for tests. And so we want to be able to let the user expand them to look at what's in that bundle. You know, if it's a PDF bundle, what is the fuzzer created and generated? And then there's also some different management use cases for these corpus objects specifically that are a little bit different than what packages are doing necessarily. So we're really wanting to use this as like the back-end architecture components to be able to build the front end and the experiences we're looking for on top of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And so just use the generic packages API to build your own front end, basically.
Yeah, if you give me a second to look up the issue, I can share a couple of the design mocks that we've put together that might be illustrative as well.
I linked in the Zoom chat a link to the screenshots if you'd like.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, thanks, Fernando. That's awesome.
Like, I mean, like we had some. Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so like each of these rows would be one of the individual corpus items that we're talking about. That would be served by a package of some sort on the back end. But an example of one of the things we'd want to do that's not really supported with packages, say it would be really specific to corpus management. If I can find the screenshot. All right, well, so it doesn't look like it's on this list of 8, but essentially you would be able to click on one of these rows and it would expand to show you maybe the 4 or 5 files inside of that corpus object that the fuzz testing engine has created and generated over its various cycles.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't seem too far from what you would see in a package, because for a package you would see you would click into it and you would see all the different versions. Maybe I could open up. But yeah, I understand you want to have it in the section where the user is looking for it, right? That's like and you want to be able to customize it how you want and not have to operate within the.
Yeah,
okay.
We're going to diverge pretty quickly from what a standard package set of workflow is as we add stuff to this over time.
Okay.
Yeah. In technical terms, right, would be like a subclass of the package, right? Where we want to inherit from you and then add our additional stuff on top of it.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. So now I understand the need for why you would want to hide it from the package registry and show it on your side. And also, it sounds like there's going to be many of these files updated. So at some point having like a cleanup policy, which I could share an issue that we're probably going to tackle that in like Q1, maybe Q2 of next year. So we hopefully can address that. So the one idea that I think James maybe brought up about using labels.
Oh no, labels was Yevgeny. Yeah.
Okay, Yevgeny. Yeah, and so is it Yevgeny or Yevgeny? Sorry. Either. Okay.
I'm curious. Which one is the correct one?
I mean, like it's a Russian name, so I don't know like what's the correct one in English. Right?
How do you say it in Russian then?
It's Yevgeny.
It is Yevgeny. Okay,
Yeah.
I've been saying it wrong. Sorry.
It's both works, yeah.
Okay.
But I like that idea. We have this desire to add labels, and this comes up from customers who maybe they want to have custom labels for their packages to be able to mark things as cost center or something else. We may want to do that for some reason, like for internal packages. There's been some hesitation in doing it because there was some thought that we should use this sort of like the existing package manager formats labeling systems, like NPM has their own labeling. Why should we recreate labels? But now that we have the generic packages, those obviously don't automatically come with that ability. So maybe that we can add that functionality. That could be a good way to tackle it. I guess the other option would be to build something into the front end that would hide it, although that doesn't seem as scalable a solution.
I do want to bring up another concern from another backend engineer. I think Mike, his concern is right. I think his comment was, I think packages are intended to be public, right? I think, or the endpoint. So where corpuses tend to be something you want to be private. So his concern was security, and if there's a security role-based or permissions-based access to those corpuses that will be, the corpus will be uploading to the package registry. You know, if we don't want to just hide it with the parameter query param in the UI and call it a day, because that potentially could have sensitive information on there.
I see. Yeah, so then there's this other idea that we would have to create like protected packages or have different level permissions for packages. I wonder if we could reuse like a dedicated project that these corpuses can go in, and then you can control permissions to that project. More fine grained, so you could basically say only admin have control to that or have access to that project.
Do you mean like a full GitLab project, or do you mean I don't know if we have a word for it. So like the .wiki Git repository. Do you mean like how that's kind of a project attached to a real project, or do you mean a fully separate project?
You could have a fully separate project so the project where like, for example, if you're using npm in a project, you don't have to publish your npm packages to that project. You could publish it to a separate one, and the code can live somewhere else, and then you can control the permissions for that project. That would be something you could do now. But then there's this other issue of saying like, okay, well, we want to be able to control permissions at the individual package level. Like maybe you want to be able to have something equivalent of protected packages, right? Where only admin can view it or write to it.
It seems like it would probably add a lot of complexity for end users on how to manage that too, because maybe if you have two teams, you don't want team A to see the corpus from team B necessarily. And if you had to do all the corpuses in a single project, that gets hairy. And if you had to have every project have a shadow project just for corpuses, then we're doubling the number of projects in a customer's deployment, which would also be tricky.
Right. Yeah, so we would need a separate, maybe the first iteration could be to do something to hide it from the user interface, and then the more longer term solution could be something like, well, have something like a different way of marking those packages so that only certain folks can look at them.
Yeah, I'm not sure that just hiding it from the user interface would be good. So packages right now are public.
If the project is public.
Right.
If
okay.
If
that's what we clarified in the issue. It's they're intended to be accessible by anyone who has access to the project. So if you can have read access to the project, then you have read access to the package repositories, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that's different than what we would want for the corpuses.
Okay.
I'm not sure, because the corpuses should be available, I think, to any of the developers. So we may have an issue at whatever the reporter level. But I think the corpuses would be available. What we definitely don't want is like a private project having public corpuses, right? Because the corpuses have the crashes and potentially vulnerabilities. So that
wouldn't be the case, but for guests don't have any privileges, and I believe a reporter has read access privileges to the packages. So we might have to accommodate that somehow.
Would we treat the corpus the same way as we treat being able to view vulnerability information? So as in like when you're looking at the security dashboard?
The security dashboard is what level? Is that developer?
I think so, because I can look at it on GitLab, and I'm not a maintainer at GitLab. Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine it would be the same as a developer, because you're looking at source code and the crash, right, which is a stack trace, and then the vulnerability, which is, or where the crash is the same as a vulnerability. So whatever the lowest level to get access to the repo is what I would imagine the corpus would be. I don't think it would need to be any higher, but
it says you could read view security reports if you are a reporter. It's one option. And
this is essentially reading a security report. It's just a very, very technical one. You know, it's just the stack trace and everything.
So I did want to mention another option, and the reason, and then I'll explain why I was thinking of it. So the generic package repository, to me, I could see as being a short term. But if we wanted to start having statistics and extra corpus specific information stored with each package item, I was thinking we might need our own version of a package repository instead of using the generic one. So if we wanted to store, oh, this corpus has generated, a number of crashes and persist that somewhere in the database, we could have a separate table or to track extra metadata about those corpus items, or we could have like our own package repository that does very corpus specific things. But I don't remember what our long-term goal was with that type of information in the corpus. I just
So,
remember talking about it a long time ago.
Yeah, so I mean, so we might need indeed in the future maybe have some kind of our own storage for like corpus storage, but like I would really, I think like I would lean more towards reusing currently the components. So first we'll have it ready for the next iteration, and we almost have like all the requirements now at the generic package registry at the backend, and then like as you know, next iteration or the iteration after that, if we see that we are really kind of we are really missing features that are not a good fit for the generic package registry, then I would say let's try and build a corpus registry essentially.
We do have each package manager format has a metadata model that goes along with it. It's different from format to format. So it's possible that as we want to add features or something like that, we could build that into the model for generic packages, and it wouldn't be something that was out of vision with what we were trying to do.
Yeah,
Or
and
it could be.
yeah, and of course, yeah, sorry. Yeah, and of course, like reusing code is always good, but in anyway, just as like for this iteration, I think it will be it will be just we won't make it to really forking like this whole piece, I think. So I would really be more inclined to use the core what we currently have.
It was a couple of milestones of work, I know, to get the generic stuff done. So even if you could reuse a lot of it in a new thing, it's still a lot of work. And then
yeah,
something else.
Would it be? I'm not that familiar with how much code there is around just the generic repository. Would it be feasible eventually, if we needed it, to just inherit from the generic one and then add our own metadata table and tighter permissions?
The permissions would be the interesting piece, because I'm not sure how I'm not sure how the permissions would work. We'd have to probably talk to one of the developers about that who understands the model a little bit more, but I think at least adding the metadata would be totally possible. And then not every package would have to utilize every set of metadata, or maybe there's like, they could even have two different models. I don't know.
Okay, awesome. So this is making sense to me of what we've been talking about, using the generic package registry with no extra metadata. We just need to figure out permissions, right? And then if we need to, then we inherit from the generic package registry or something so that we can add our own metadata and corpus specific other items, I think.
That sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good to me. And would we still need to figure out if the project is private and the registry is private, is that enough, or do we still need to go further on permissions as like a first iteration?
I think that's a Sam question.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through it. I think that would be enough for us to get started with for this iteration. At GitLab, we have a lot of work to do with more detailed RBAC, but that's an ocean we don't need to boil.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to avoid. Everyone's like, when are you going to support IAM roles? And
yeah, it's really just that aspect of these can be potentially critical security assets. They should never be public never be accessible unless the user can access every other security artifact that we have on them. Just to confirm my understanding, especially from James's summary. So if we would use that generic package registry at the start, we would hide these corpus objects from the front end on the package registry, so they would only show up in the new corpus registry screens. that correct, or did I hear something different?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on that too, because ideally things like that, permissions should be, we hit an endpoint. We don't want a user to be able to circumvent what they have access to because, they circumvent in the front end, because if they're doing a curl request to the, to the endpoint. So I think that should be filtered out on the back end. And I guess I had gotten that feedback. I guess it had been brought up before, and that's kind of what I was hoping to lean towards. So I wanted to double check if that's what the team thought.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I always just prefer to be explicit rather than implicitly assume. So glad we're on the same page there.
Yeah, actually, I I want also to like double verify, because this is what I need to implement next. So essentially now I'll have to add the feature. So I'll open an issue or comment in an issue that I already opened. So I need to add a feature that gives this label or type. When you upload a generic package registry, I'll add another type field where we can have like corpus, right? And then on the, like, 1 second, and then on the list packages, I think you can, on the list packages, you can have the same query, right? And then it will be filtered on the front end or something along those lines.
Well, I guess that maybe we could, I guess that's where my concern was. So like on the package registry screen now, we want to filter out corpuses, right? Because we don't want corpuses to show there. So the question was, if we do in the front end, that means it's coming back from the endpoint. Is that it? And because package registries, I guess it's public, right? Is that an issue now? We don't want that to happen, because we don't want to filter at front end, because we want them to be filtered out at the endpoint, because we don't want people who don't have access to see it either. And then we don't want them showing up on that screen anyway, I guess. Are we opening up ourselves to problems if we just filter, we get back all the red packages, inclusive of corpus management, and then filter out client side? I could do that in the front end, it's easy, but is that what we really want here? Are there concerns in doing it that way? And I would be inclined to have it filtered on the back end, just because we don't want to use it to circumvent the front end by curling to that endpoint and getting extra data that they're not supposed to be seeing.
So let me share my screen for a second.
Yeah, so as a security thing, we can never do that, right? So we can only do that if the permissions are the same.
The thing
So
is,
the front end is never a place to enforce permissions.
yeah, the thing is that, like, what I said is, so we have like the publish new package, right? So what I suggested, like, that we will have another type here, right? And then we will be able to tag, okay, this is a corpus, and then on the backend we'll be able to either filter. But I mean, there is this endpoint list packages, which we will use both on the corpus management screen, and we will use it, and I think we use it also on the corpus, on the generic package registry screen. So this like endpoint is used by both. And in one endpoint, we don't want to show the corpus, and on the other, and like on one screen, we don't want to show the corpus packages, and on the other screen, we do want to show only this packages. So I thought that it will be like that there will be some kind of filter, because
Sure.
Otherwise, how we will be able to hide it from one screen, but not to hide it from the other screen?
Oh no,
Right?
I think we could do the filter parameter. That's fine, but enforcing that parameter should still be done by backend. So for example, if you say filter by corpus, the backend should still do the validation to make sure that you have access to get those corpuses, the right user permission. So that's fine. I'm okay with providing that from the front end to filter out, so long as the backend enforces that permissions model for accessing it. Because, we don't want to usually just say, okay, give me corpuses and you get them. You should be able to, if you pass in that parameter, say filter by corpuses, then the backend should say, okay, I'll give you corpuses if they exist and you have permissions for it. And that's okay, I think, to distinguish that endpoint. Or we could add another endpoint, but I think doing the parameter with the type or filter would work well, so long as we enforce the backend permissions.
So
Well, I think on this API, Evgeny sharing a screen, this supports authentication today though, right? So if you don't authenticate, you only get public. So I would assume we could just say you have to be authenticated to get those results from the endpoint.
that depends on the permissions of the project itself, though. If it's a private project, all package items, repository items, you have to be authenticated to get access to it. Even in that case, for corpus, let's see, if I understand it right, we want to enforce developer permission minimum to access corpus items, right?
I think that sounds right to me, yeah.
Okay. So in that case, thinking about it like that, even if the project is private, you could still have reporter access to the project and then still be able to access the package repository, unless we have the some sort of permissions thing in there to make sure you're at least developer. If I'm understanding that right.
That sounds right to me. Yeah, reporter right now in a private project, a reporter would have pull access to a generic package. So we'd have to just put in a like special case for where type equals corpus.
So for using the generic package registry, and I guess this would be, so, okay, what if we added more granular permissions for package registry types? And we don't even have to expose that to the user yet. If it's just in the backend, then we can say, okay, if it's a corpus, then we apply the permissions. Then we don't have to have specific type equals corpus checks everywhere. I will say that makes me nervous. I've shot myself in the foot a lot doing things like that. So I'm just stating it makes me nervous. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think we are a bit out of time, so I don't know if people need to go to other meeting or not. I can stay for. I'm free after that, but I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
I could stay.
I've got a few minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good too.
Cool.
As far as the front end goes, I don't think our implementation plan or the one I've had with Jenny changes much. We're reusing the endpoints, give or take, adding an extra parameter to pass into the endpoint. But other than that, like I'm unblocked to start the front end work next milestone. I know we have holidays and stuff, but at least I'll be able to start on that. Just giving some update, I guess.
I guess my question is still like how on the front end we will be able to distinguish, because both screens, as far as I understand, are using the list packages API. How one screen, how we are on the back end, how we are going to distinguish between those calls. And
so I guess that's what I was saying. It's like when I do the query, because you have that endpoint to list all of them, right? I can specify if it's from the corpus screen or not. Though, you know, a user can manipulate that, sure, like where they could say, hey, I'm on the corpus screen, but that's why the permissions are still, regardless of what you're asking for, enforced on the back end. So, so if you say, give me corpuses, because there's a filter type, like give me all the packages filtered by corpuses, whether or not you get them are still enforced by the back end. So like in certain terms of security, I'm not too worried in that sense. That's how I guess we have specify same endpoint, but filtering by what we want. And what that parameter can look like, it's up to you, whatever you think is appropriate and straightforward. So.
Okay, sounds good to me. I think I know how to open the next MR for review.
So it's related to what Seth was typing out, if we inherited from generic package repository, and we don't do anything different about the metadata or anything, and all we do is check with type, do the type equals, we don't, it's a separate repository, and all we do is the developer check. Is that what you're saying, Seth?
Yeah, so essentially, yeah. So you inherit from it and then you set the type, but we have a corpus registry object. And that is more like, that's more natural to apply a different permission to, as opposed to saying, hey, if this value is this, then the permission. So it's just a small coding difference. We can maybe work this out in the MR, but it just makes the permission model a little cleaner.
Yeah, sounds good.
Quick question. So with this, now that we're filtering out things, does the team think there should be additional front end work done on the packet, on the UI for the package registry list page? Because on there, are we, I guess for the endpoint, are we assuming that if nothing's specified for like, give us the list of packages, that it will just return all packages minus corpus management? And then if you do specify the parameter, then you only get corpus management, right? If that's the case, then I don't think we need to do anything for the package registry page in terms of filtering out or, you know, changing the query.
Yes, so I'm not 100% sure yet, because I need first to kind of implement and see really how it behaves. So, and then I'll be able to answer that.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks.
Could add a tab. Right now we have we're using these tabs to segment by format. You could add a tab that says corpus, and it only, I mean, implementation detail, but that's an idea. So it would be hidden if you didn't have permission to it, or if there was nothing there, but if it was, it would show up.
Although for the corpus objects, we don't necessarily want users seeing them under those package registries. We really want them to only be at that corpus registry screen. I'd be concerned if we had similar but slightly different experiences, you know, if they could view it in the package registry or the corpus registry screens.
So then, so if I had, let's say I had developer or above access and the corpus was published, and the backend is filtering it out based on if it's type check permission equals developer plus, it would show up, that would show up in the registry. So there might be some other, or the front end, there might be some other front end filtering that has to be done.
Well, I guess that's why I was asking for that endpoint that the front end hits. So like, give me the list of packages. If the new default behavior is, and again, this is like we're implementing edge cases here. It's like, give us all packages except corpus.
Okay,
that's what I'm saying. And then if we want corpus is only, we add that extra parameter to say, hey, explicitly get me corpuses. But the new default behavior is all packages, filter out corpus. I know we're kind of implementing hard-coded edge cases here, but that's the only way I could think of leveraging what we have already.
Yeah, exactly.
I was wondering, so of the people here, do we have any of the backend engineers for that team? Because my concern is that it sounds like we have a plan, but because we don't have backend engineering input from that team, I just don't want to have it be like, okay, let's go team, and then it'd be like in the maintainer reviews, like what in the world are we doing here? You know, this is going to be an issue for backend maintainer approval and all that. So I guess my ask is, essentially everyone here is on board, but we probably want to check with the backend developers who own this part of the code base to double check that, you know, get their blessing on the plan before we make all this effort, is the only concern I have left.
Yeah, I think checking with Steve Abrams or David Fernandez, even if it's just the beginnings of an MR or something, or even in the issue, I think that would be smart, because yeah, they obviously are responsible and have to maintain the code, not me. So it'd be good to have their approval. I'll
check with David. Actually, I also like I thought of inviting him, but he's in different time zone. Yeah. So I think he's almost asleep now.
Where is he based out of?
I think Europe. Spain.
Yes, Switzerland, I think.
Switzerland, right.
Cool.
Well, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to dogfooding these generic packages APIs and seeing what develops. It's going to be pretty cool to see the usage go up too. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you. That's
appreciate
awesome.
you getting
Nice to
on,
meet you,
Tim. This
Tim.
is helpful.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.
Bye.